I used to think grief only showed up after the funeral, but I was wrong. I grieved for my mother in pieces for decades while she was still sitting right across the room from me. Grieving someone who is still here is a particular kind of lonely, and you don't get casseroles for that. Today's guest knows that loneliness intimately. Nearly 2 decades ago, his wife was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease. Brent from Light is a husband, caregiver, and creator who has spent nearly 2 decades caring for his wife after she was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease. Through honest videos, conversations, and the Light podcast, he gives voice to the parts of caregiving that are so often left unsaid. The exhaustion, the loneliness, guilt, grief, and resilience that come with loving someone through chronic illness. While he works full-time in the human spaceflight industry, his passion is helping caregivers feel seen, understood, and less alone. His mission is simple: start the conversations that caregivers have been waiting for someone else to start. Welcome to the podcast. Hi, my name is Jeanette Yates, founder of The Self-Caregiver. I cared for my own mother for several decades, and now I help caregivers set boundaries and use simple tools that make care and life easier so they can feel good, not guilty. Today's guest knows that loneliness intimately. Nearly 2 decades ago, his wife was diagnosed with young-onset Parkinson's disease. He was a young husband, a brand new father, a paramedic who spent his career saving other people's lives, and then he had to learn how to hold his own family together one hard day at a time. Brent didn't set out to become a caregiving advocate. He set out to be a husband and a father. But somewhere between the hospital hallways, the financial collapse, and the quiet exhaustion nobody warned you about, he started something called Light, a space built to say the things caregivers are usually too ashamed or too tired to say out loud. Welcome to the podcast, Brent.
Thanks. You made me sound cool.
All right. So we always start with our guests, especially ones that are caregivers. We start with their caregiving journey, their personal caregiving journey. So take us back to 2007. Trudy was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's at 33, right after your youngest son was born. What do you remember about that day?
It sucked. So, her and I met in 2006. Both of us were divorced. She had one child from a previous marriage. I had 0. And we actually met on Match.com. Started dating her about 9-10 months into the dating scene. Before we even got married and had our kids, she had a little twitch in her finger. And that was equated, we thought at the time, because of her age, that it was maybe from an old car wreck. So a lot of chiropractor things that we went through. But anybody that knows Parkinson's knows that there's this process, especially through young onset. And then our kid was born Christian. And I want to say within the first year of his birth is when things started to become more obvious. And we eventually got, in that first year or so, I think it was in the first year, a diagnosis of Parkinson's disease from the Mayo Clinic down in Scott. We were living in Albuquerque at the time, but it was down in Scottsdale, Arizona. The local neurologist in Albuquerque had already called it Parkinson's, but we didn't believe her. So we followed through with the Mayo and got the diagnosis.
Well, at age 33, you're like, no, that can't be right.
No, it's terrible. You go with young onset Parkinson's knows, there's this whole process of rule outs, everything from Huntington's disease to MS to, in her case, we thought it was some sort of a pinched nerve. But the thing about Parkinson's is it will eventually show itself. And it did.
Yeah. So since you had a professional background in saving other people's lives and taking care of other people you were a special kind of paramedic though, right?
Yeah, I was, when I was active duty in the Air Force, I was an Air Force pararescueman, which not many people know. Actually, people today know because those 2 pilots that ejected in Iran were saved by PJs. They were picked up by pararescuemen flying on different aircraft. And so that's what I did. And I was taught to save lives and aid the injured in a unique, austere environment. But that doesn't prepare you for long-term caregiving.
Well, so that was my next question is, so even, you have this professional experience. Did you have any concept of what caregiving might be like or what you thought caregiving might be like before you knew what it actually was? Or did it just hit you like a ton of bricks? It probably did both.
Yeah. So in the emergency medicine community, because I've moonlighted a lot over the years in different hospitals, you get a patient, you work them for an hour or 2, or sometimes longer, depending on what the issue is. Anybody that's been in an ER, sometimes you can wait a while and you're either discharged or you go upstairs. They're in and out. But when you become a caregiver, that illness is at home. And prior to that, my only caregiving experience was working in the different hospitals and, taking my grandfather, I took care of him a little bit before he passed, but not like this. Emergency medicine and long-term caregiving are completely different animals.
Yes, totally. So, one of the things that you have said, you do say on your channels on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram, wherever you are, you're all over the place, is that you're tired of the sanitized version. And can I get an amen? What does the sanitized version leave out?
So this is what I'm learning, especially because I started 13 months ago and I've grown quite a few followers in the last 13 months. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And then I have the podcast is also on Spotify. What I'm learning is the dementia and Alzheimer's caregivers really identify with me.
Yeah. Well, I think also long-term caregivers have a little bit more, they've gone through that period of that, not that it's ever like sunshine and roses, but when caregiving first starts, like even your wife was diagnosed and you're sad, you're devastated, you're worried, but you still have this sense of, I can do this. This is, I'm her husband, or like me, I'm her daughter, or, like whatever you have this, but then that attitude burns out pretty quickly. And then you still have decades left.
Yeah, I've said it a couple of times in different platforms. It's the death by a thousand cuts. And then a lot of people like to use the long goodbye. With the way I do things and why I started doing what I'm doing. First of all, let me go back. I started about 4 years ago. There was a lady I just interviewed 2 podcasts ago, Heather Kennedy. She used to be a really prominent influencer in the Parkinson's community. And she influenced me to say, hey, you should tell your story. And I did on my personal platform. And I put a video out on YouTube about 4 years ago on my personal platform. It went a little bit nuts. And then I paused because she warned me, Heather's like, Brent, if you go down this road, you need to tell your story, but know that there's going to be haters essentially and consequences. So I put out a pretty harsh video about how screwed up the healthcare system is. And I went after the local congressman in that video. And then I shut it down because I got real popular real quick. And then 3-4 years later, I started Held Light. Why? Because you mentioned the sanitized version. What I'm learning, like I said, was the dementia and Alzheimer's folks tend to really understand it. They understand what I'm dealing with, and because they're in that same long-term burnout. But the Parkinson's community, which is what my wife has, I've caught some shit from that community. And by the way, it's mostly the people with the illness that are not happy with what I'm saying. And I get why, especially folks that are young and early to the disease, or even older that are early to the disease, they don't want to hear it. And the reality is this disease is progressive. This disease gets ugly towards the end. And I'm in that. There are stages of Parkinson's disease, and my wife is in those final stages, and it's not pretty. And I speak what we're really, really going through, because there's a lot of folks that put out too much toxic positivity. And I know positivity can be infectious, and we should try to be positive and look at the glass half full. But there is a yin to the yang, and you can't ignore the dark side of caregiving. If you do, you're not going to do okay.
Well, and I think, the difference between positivity and toxic positivity is reality.
Yeah.
Toxic positivity is going to avoid the reality of the situation. And you can't address the needs. You can't care for the person if you're not addressing the reality of the situation. And so, I wholeheartedly agree. But one thing I did want to say to you is I saw you just interviewed somebody with Parkinson's, or they interviewed you.
Yeah, that's Kathleen. That's the lady I was telling you about.
So one of the things that you either said it on the actual TikTok that you posted, or I read it in the caption, but this idea of, what I'm saying might ruffle feathers, or it might sound rough to someone with Parkinson's, but I'm not talking to them. I'm talking to their caregiver.
Yeah.
And, and I think that's an important distinction too, is, even some of the things that, not that if my mom ever saw anything I posted that I would have been embarrassed, but there are things that I might say on a post that I wouldn't say to her face. Right. And that may be different for you, but, if I'm talking to another caregiver, that's different than the way I'm going to talk to, or when I was talking to my mom's doctors, I might say things differently than I was talking to her face. But there is this, I loved how you put that. Like, I hear that, I receive, that feedback, but also I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to your caregiver, or I'm talking,
I said, I think there's a short that I put out, because I get feedback from some of the Parkinson's folks, like Esther, one of the girls I do the podcast with when we do the Parkinson's podcast. And it's harsh to hear, some of the things. Now, I'll say this too. My wife, Trudy, is one of the people who pushed me to do this. Like, I've been Montel Williams. I was on a TV show with Montel Williams. He said, bro, you need to do this. Heather Kennedy, the lady you're referencing, she used to be a massive Parkinson's influencer. And then she came out of the limelight. She stopped doing it because of the haters. But so I've been told for years now, you need to do this. So 13 months ago, I said, screw it, I'll do it. By the way, of the 50,000 followers across all the platforms, we're talking like a handful of people, and all the other ones, I tell folks that, especially the folks with the illness that get frustrated with what I'm saying, I tell them, go take what I'm doing and show it to your spouse and let them hear these things if they're not already following. And what that has done is I'm seeing a ripple effect. I'll post something and then I'll see another influencer, a week or two or a day or two later repost or do the same thing. And that's a good thing. It's forcing a conversation that should be had. Otherwise, the spouse is going to have resentment towards the person that they're caring for towards the end of that disease. And I'm telling you that because I had resentment towards my wife towards the end of the disease. And if it wasn't for all the therapy and all the things that I've gone through to get my head straight, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned it, and I want you to tell us more about creating Held Light. So why did you create Held Light? It's a website, it's a platform, it's your channels, it's a podcast. What is Held Light? Why did you create it? And what do you hope caregivers find there?
I don't know yet.
So from the outside looking in, you've created a platform where Parkinson's caregivers can feel seen, heard, and not judged.
I've been told I say the thing out loud that they can't say. I give them a voice. Held Light was a vision for me. I went through a program and I had this vision, and it was, I don't know if I told you this before, but the idea is I was at a point, it was around 2018, right before COVID. I was at a point in my caregiving journey in my adult life where I was not good. And I talk a lot about the darkness in some of my videos. And I was in those dark places. And I just remember having a little light at my feet. And that little light was showing me something. I was terrified of the dark. Like I thought I was going to die. And I was terrified of the dark. And there was this tiny little light and it was showing me a way. And I just knew to, okay, follow the light. And as I followed this little light, it got brighter and brighter and brighter. And kind of a long story short, eventually I popped out of these really dark woods into this beautiful open pasture, and the sun was shining. And the moral of my little story and my little vision was that light at my feet. First of all, it was never dark. The sun was always shining, but my mind was clouded. And the light at my feet was friends and families and therapists and coworkers and all those people in our circle that were shining the light for me. They could see I was struggling, but my own mind with my own ego was in the way of seeking help. So they just kind of showed the light. And that's where the term Held Light comes from, is we hold the light for each other in the darkness because we're here too. We're in it too. Or we've been there, like in your case, we've been there, and I can show you that light out.
Yeah, I remember having a epiphany that like a little bit of time after mom passed away. I mean, it still feels like it was just yesterday, but I realized I'm not going to say my caregiving journey is over because I still have a father that's alive and in-laws. I may be taking care of my husband. So like this idea that like it's ended is not even relevant for me, but not even believable for me, because you always have another opportunity. And that can be intimidating when you're like in it and you're like, when is this going to be over sometimes, which we're going to talk a little bit about the tough stuff.
I hope I never have to do this again, but I'm better prepared now than I was, 3 years ago, even a year ago. Since I started doing this Held Light stuff, I've learned so much from so many. By the way, I'm about halfway done with your book. So, because I'm big into reading books. The book I've been harping on a lot lately is Emma Heming Willis's book, that phenomenal book. If you haven't read it, it's worth reading. And so because I started this thing, I'm like, all right, if I'm going to say things on the internet, I probably should know what I'm talking about, or at least read up on the truth data. And then I listen to your folks, like I listen to you, all the other folks that are out there, those other influencer types. I watch everybody else's podcasts, and it's made me accountable. My wife's even said it, I've become a better husband, a better caregiver. My son has noticed a difference in me because now I have to be this model.
Right. Well, and I think too, and this is a sidetrack from the notes I have for this, but I will say, like, when you decide to just share your story and share your personal experience, right? And that you don't have to research that, right? You're just sharing your personal experience. But at some point, if you're going to start giving some sort of advice or recommendations, you have to do some research. You can't just go out there just spouting, just because it's the way you did it isn't the way everybody should do it, right?
I know that you hit this a lot on your platform. There is a lot of misinformation out there. And I thank you for what you're doing to kind of keep that shit in check.
Well, and it's just, like one of the things that really gets under my craw. I don't know. That might be an old timey saying. I don't know. My grandma used to say it, but the caregivers I know who are caregiving for people with dementia don't say this, but there's a lot of things out there that are like, you can prevent dementia if you do X, Y, Z.
Oh God. Yeah.
And I'm like, you can reduce the risk or you can improve brain function. You cannot prevent dementia.
I have a video that on YouTube alone, I think this morning it broke 8 million views. And it's a video of my wife with really bad dyskinesia. And I have her permission to make that video. The Park doc, one of the doctors that I bring on sometimes, she's a movement disorder specialist. She's been encouraging me. She's like, show that.
Yeah, I saw it. It was so moving. And of course, and I'm like, of course, he had to put that in there because he was going to get 40 million comments about how dare you post that. So you have to say, my wife gave me permission to do this. This is part of her thing,
Well, what's interesting is if you go through the comments, how many people are advertising miracle cures for what she has. And my DMs blew up. And by the way, I've listened to some of those comments. The number one most overwhelming comment was THC, medical marijuana, CBD stuff. We'd been have been experimenting with a CBD oil proprietary blend that we're getting from I can't talk too much about it yet, but there's a gentleman who's got this proprietary blend, and he's allowed us we're testing it. It seems to be helping, but we were really reluctant to go the THC route. And I know you're here in Florida as well. And we got our card. We had a doctor came to the house, and we're seeing some improvement with that. So for the gazillion comments on it, I listened to that, and it seems to be helping. But the ones that blow my mind are like people with miracle cures or devices and things. And I'm like, just go away.
Yeah, it stinks. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit. Today's sponsor is Savvy Security. You know that low-grade worry that never quite goes away? Wondering if your mom is going to pick up the wrong phone call or click the wrong link when you're not there? That's exactly why Savvy Security exists. Savvy has built the first digital safety layer designed for families like yours, tools that help flag suspicious calls, texts, and online threats before they reach your loved one. It's not about taking away anyone's independence, it's about giving caregivers the peace of mind and giving people they love a quiet layer of protection in the background. To learn more and try their free tool ScamWise, go to savvysecurity.com. That's SAVI security.com. What has caregiving taught you about love that you never expected?
So when we say in sickness and health, Trudy's my second wife. When I got married the first time and I said those vows, I didn't mean it because I truly didn't love her. And hopefully she doesn't see this.
I'm sure she knows.
She knows. I mean, I did love her, but it wasn't the kind of love, so we loved each other. We weren't in love, if that makes sense. So when you truly love somebody, when you're truly committed to somebody, when something like this hits, that's where you learn that true core value in sickness and health. And because there are people out there, I have one lady that I speak with on occasion who has an illness and her husband left her. He's like, I'm not dealing with this, and bailed. Yeah. So I'm learning, especially from a lot of the comments I get on some of those videos that I post of my wife, is just how many spouses don't stick around. So to answer your question, if you decide that you're going to get married and you're going to marry somebody, you should consider what in sickness and health really means. And that's what it's taught me. It's taught me what true commitment actually is. I didn't think I could be able to handle this, and if you had asked me on the day of our wedding, hey, just so you know, in a couple of years, this is what's going to happen. In 20 years from now, would I still stick around? And I think the answer would be, yeah, I sure would,
So you kind of mentioned this already, but I'm gonna let you dive in a little deeper. Has it changed how you show love to your sons? You mentioned that they said you changed, so that's why I'm wondering.
Yeah. So there's two different stories there. I'm actually writing a memoir, and each of my boys have their own chapter. And Mateo's chapter, my oldest son, is very different looking than Christian's chapter, my younger son. Why? Because my older son knew a mother. He was 5 when we got married. And he was in probably the 10th grade as things started to really get bad. So he had most of his childhood with a relatively healthy mother that was very present, whereas Christian was diagnosed almost within the first year of his birth, and he was in elementary school when things really started, so here's this kid who's in adolescence and then all through senior high school. Now he's local college, but they have two different views. But what I think when I talked to them and when I was doing my research on the book, I talked to both of them, and your actions speak louder than your words, so they see the dedication that I have for her, and they understand, I think, as young men. I think if anything, whether I actually taught it to them or they learned it from observing, they've learned what dedication to a spouse really is. And I think that's kind of where I'm at with that one on the boys. There's a lot of things like Mateo, I taught how to drive and fish, and Christian surfing, all these other things. But I think at the end of the day, the men that they are becoming, I'm hoping that the way that they see how I've treated their mother and loved on their mother, and they've seen the bad stuff too, but they also see how I stay dedicated to her and how I fight for her and her needs and their needs. And I think that's a very powerful lesson for them.
I don't know about you, but I know that when I started, much to my children's chagrin, they would just prefer I'm off social media because they're not really on it either. But they have their accounts. And when I started really talking about caring for my mom was sharing her own journey on Facebook, on Facebook, of course, as long as she could. And so I decided to share my own, right? I knew that my kids were going to call me on my BS.
Yeah, my son does it all the time.
So I knew that if I was going to go on there and say like caregiving journey, hashtag, blah, 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 I was going to have to, I could talk about those beautiful moments, but I was also going to have to talk about the crappy ones too. Or they were going to be like, Mom, you look like you're having, like it's sunshine and roses on your Instagram, but you come home and you cry every night. Like I knew they would be like, what?
My son Christian is one of the ones who was pretty serious about, Dad, you should get on. He's the reason why the first held light was TikTok. And he's like, Dad, get on TikTok. I'm like, why? Because he had a TikTok account that did really well. He was a fat kid that got in shape, and he had millions of views and tens of thousands of followers. And he since stopped doing it. But he was like, Dad, tell your story. I saw Montel Williams, Kathleen Kiddo, or Heather Kennedy. She goes by Kathleen Kiddo. And I had my son, and then Trudy, my wife. All those are 4 people that are like, you should do this. And my youngest son, Christian, is also really good at analytics. He's been helping me with some of this. So, and it's weird because it's kind of bonded us a little bit. There's some things that we just, he's 19 now. He'll be turning 20 soon. He's in college. And this is just like a new thing that a lot like, hey buddy, what'd you think of that last video? He also sanity checks a few of my things, like, hey buddy, what do you think of this one? He's like, don't post that, or yes, you need to do that. So
yeah, that's good to have a little gut check. So you and I both say this, but you talk about how caregivers don't have to be perfect. Of course, none of us are. So not only do we not have to be, we can't. But that guilt, that loneliness, the frustration, the grief, all of that, sometimes we think that is what makes us a bad caregiver. But you say that none of that makes you a bad caregiver. That's just making you human. Can you talk a little bit more about that imperfect caregiver piece?
Yeah, we're perfectly imperfect. I have a hard time. A lot of the good caregivers are hard on themselves when they get to the bad spot, the dark spot. And there are days where I feel like a turd. I've said mean things to her. No, there's not some days. Every day I'm a turd at some point in that day, So there's not some days. It's like, what hour in the day I was a turd. So, but and that, again, that's that balance that, not to get all philosophical, but you can't have the darkness without the light. Like, we have to accept. I'm a big fan of Jungian theory, shadow work. For anybody that doesn't know what it is, look it up. Carl Jung is like that shadow self. There's a side of us that thinks certain things, and that's just human. That's just normal. And I've said it. I'm not afraid to say it. Like, there have been times where I have literally looked at my wife in pure frustration, and I've said, like, I just wish you would die already so I can get on with my life. And I feel like the biggest piece of crap shit, whatever, when that's happened, it doesn't happen like it used to, but, go back 3 or 4 years ago, I was not in a good place. And with good therapy and coaches and the stuff that I've been working on and books, it's helping me. So it's okay. It's okay to feel guilty. It's okay to feel broken. It's okay to feel those feelings. What's not okay is to pretend that shit doesn't exist and bottle that up, because that's what I did and it broke me.
Well, and I think, when you can't help what you think, but you can help what you do. Right. And so, if you're spiraling, if it's getting unmanageable, that's when you go to therapy, that's when you get therapy or there's plenty of things out there.
Walk away. That's what I do now.
Like walk away. I remember, so my mom went on hospice in September of 24 and lived until June of 2025. And there were times, and she was bedridden for 2 years before that, where she wasn't even getting out of bed. She was sleeping most of the time anyway. But I remember thinking, how long, we are in the in-between. Like, she's not living and she's not gone, in our faith to heaven,
That's caregiver purgatory.
She's stuck here and I'm stuck. We're both stuck. And I would think that, and luckily I had already been in therapy for years. So I knew to talk about that. But that is a hard thing to think about and then give yourself grace for. And then to the point about, being a turd, I do just want to say, and I have made this very clear as many times as I possibly can, but sometimes people are like, oh, not you, Jeanette. No.
I hate to break it to you people. Jeanette's not perfect.
But, I did a caring bridge for my mom after she stopped being able to share. I would do that and post the, updates about her and how she was doing. And then I would always, share something. And then people would comment, oh, Jeanette, you are such a saint. You're an angel sent from God, and da 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 da. Which, I'm a person of faith, so I appreciated those words. But at the same time, I felt compelled to go in the comments and go, I can assure you, I'm not a saint. And then for people who, I'd never posted this in a comment, but if people one-on-one, people that knew her and knew me that would say that to my face and just be like, you're a saint. You're an absolute saint. I'd be like, well, let me tell you about the time both my mom and I were cussing each other out. Let me tell you about the time she said, if you walk out that door, don't you ever come back. And I said, promise. And I turned around and I walked out the door and I slammed it, and then of course, I went back eventually. But,
I think every young kid has had that moment.
Yeah. But if you don't say that on a podcast or, if you don't share that as part of your journey, people think, oh, there's something wrong with me for wanting to get in my car and never come back. Just drive till the gas runs out.
That's exactly it. There are a lot of, call them influencers, call them what you will, people that are just showing how perfect life is and how they're just making it work. And I'm so blessed and happy. And that's not real. That's not reality. And there are some folks that can get away with that and are truly that way, but they're not in the trenches like you and I have been for years and years and years. If I only had to do this for a few months to a year, I think I could be that person that could have that kind of a positive look at how blessed I am to do this. But when it goes on and on and on, it death by 1,000 cuts, you start to bleed.
Well, and I struggle too with unless you're going to tell me how to sign up for a Medicare plan or Medicaid in my state or something that's very specific, set up power of attorney, and maybe that's even different in different states. I don't even know. But so unless you have a specific thing that has step 1, step 2, step 3, I have a really big problem with hearing and I also will say, I tried this. I tried to be here's how to stop burnout, or here's how to da, da, da. And the truth is, what works for me, and first of all, I don't think you can stop burnout. I think you
can slow it down. You can
slow it down. You could make it last less longer, but it's going to, especially for long-term caregivers, it's going to happen. You just need to know how to manage it. So that was things, but I have a really, speaking of getting under my craw, like I said earlier, that's another thing that I really struggle with. Like I said, there are some things that actually have steps that are appropriate. You shared that video of the steps that you take to help your wife when she's experiencing those dyskinesia. You could, in theory, say, step 1 is I assess the situation. Step 2, I do, adjust this. You could do that. But even, there's things like that. But most of the time, we're problem solvers that are solving a different problem every single day.
For me, when it comes to the caregiver burnout and caregiver syndrome is a real thing. And anybody that does not know what that is, Google it. You'll see I have it. I'm dealing with it, And it's a medical kind of side effects of chronic stress and sleep deprivation and high cortisol levels, but I've learned through, the last couple of years, what is the best medicine for anything? Diet and exercise. And I'm not saying diet like restrict, like eat healthy. I said it the other day, I forget who it was. And what I said to her was, happy people are healthy and healthy people are happy. And if we, I'm telling you this, and I just ate a pizza before we started, but so eating healthy is one thing that helps mitigate the caregiver burnout and stress. Sleep, if you can get it, and exercise. But the other, and those are easier said than done. But you know what is actually easy to do that I've gotten better at is learning to calm down and ground. I go outside, put my bare feet in the grass. The outdoors is a very powerful healing thing. God created this big, beautiful blue marble in the middle of this universe, and we're meant to be outside and see the sun and let nature heal us. And a lot of caregivers are stuck inside all day, and they just forget to go outside and let the sun hit them, So there's a lot of things that you can do to help mitigate the burnout. And what I'm learning and what I mostly talk about is the little micro things that you can do that can actually make a difference. Like last night, she was having a hard time. I could feel myself boiling over. I said, babe, I love you, but I have to step away. And so I just walked outside. I stared at the moon or the stars for a little bit, calmed down, took my 10 deep, slow breaths, came back in, and it was the reset that I needed to get her to bed. Because if I'd have stayed in the room with her, it would have been a very different outcome.
Neither one of y'all would have gotten to sleep, right? And it's like, today's sponsor is Savvy Security. You're probably looking out for two generations right now. Your parents on one side and your kids with digital devices on the other. And both of them are getting scam calls and texts that didn't exist 5 years ago. Savvy was built exactly for households like yours. One family plan covers everyone: parents, teens, and you. Savvy is real-time protection against AI-powered scams before they reach the people you love. You can have greater peace of mind for just $7.99 a month. That's $7.99 a month for coverage of unlimited family members. Savvy is live in the App Store and Google Play. Details at savvysecurity.com. That's SAVI security.com. Well, so we're talking about these micro moments, these little things, these, use what you have in terms of nature outside, right? Wherever you are, even if it's, concrete jungle, there's a sky, right? Even if it's not as clear as others. But you also talk about some other things that actually help people get through the stuff that's the most draining physically, emotionally, the hardest things. You talk about respite care, therapy, and hospice. So we do have a little bit of time to chat about hospice if you want to, but just share with me a little bit more about how respite care works in your situation. And we both talked about therapy a little bit. So let's start with respite care.
Yeah, so a respite for us. So I'm a federal employee, so I still work for the government because I'm here in Florida with you. I have Florida Federal Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I'm learning just how good I got it. Like that's another thing this platform has taught me is to use the word blessed. I am actually very blessed with a really good healthcare plan, but I've served my country to earn that, And so she's on hospice right now, but there's a difference between hospice end of life and hospice palliative care. And right now we're walking a tightrope between end of life and palliative care. My insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shields, is paying for her to be on hospice. And that covers nurses that come to the house once a week. That covers all the medications. And the doctor comes quarterly and the PA comes, I believe, once a month and does like provider checkups. She also has with that service, a CNA, which I can't say enough about how good they are to help her with bathing and some of the things around the house. And that's covered through my insurance plan. And that's under hospice. But I won a Medicaid case through the state of Florida by lawyering up with an elder care lawyer. And through that process, we were able to get a home health aid, not Medicare, because she's not old enough and didn't pay enough into the system, but she got Medicaid through the state of Florida that allows us to have a caregiver in the home Monday through Friday so that I could go to work. And 4 years ago or so, before we started all of that, I was bankrupt, I was struggling, and I was in the darkest point of this whole thing. And I didn't know how to navigate any of these systems. And through a good social worker, we worked through it. So the hospice allows her to get in-home health care without me having to take her to appointments all the time. Medicaid covers the home health aid. And without those, I would be bankrupt. Without those, I would not be able to work. I'd have to retire early, and I cannot live off of my retirement check alone.
Yeah, and like you say, it is so, and even Medicaid, which is a federal program but distributed by the states, it's like, it's different. But there are area councils on aging in most states. In my particular Northeast Florida area, it's called Elder Source. So you can go to your Googles or your wherever and look for that, for those of you listening or watching and want to learn more about resources that are out there for respite for you, for the, discussing the difference between hospice and palliative care and when it's appropriate. Calling a hospice or palliative care facility or place or program, you're not signing up for it. Like, you have to sign a lot of paperwork. You're not going to accidentally put your loved one on hospice. So
that's literally what I did. I called a local nursing home because I was at my wit's end, and I knew that social workers had all the answers. You just had to find the right one. And that's how I got dialed in. And before I forget, because you had mentioned respite as well, is like, so respite is literally that. It just gives you a break. There are times I typically use respite when I have to travel for my job, because I do on occasion have to travel, not as much as I used to. Luckily, I'm so lucky that I have a commander, because I still serve in a different capacity that's supportive. But I have to put her in a facility. Now, here's the thing. The respite that we put her in is a skilled nursing facility. But she's in such bad shape now where somebody has to be with her at all times. And so the skilled nursing facility, they don't have a one-on-one capability.
Right. It's 24/7, but it's not 24/7 at her bedside.
Right. It's like one nurse to 4 or 5 patients. And she needs somebody close at all times, because she's a fall risk, and she has all the video that went viral happens a lot. And so that being said, I can put her in this house that's a respite house that my insurance covers that. And what they'll do is they'll put somebody there to be with her the whole time. And I'm authorized per my insurance plan 30 days a year for that. So I can take 30 days a year. I can do it in 1-day increments, 5-day increments, or I could even do it up to 30 days straight. But not all healthcare plans will do it that way. Most healthcare plans will only do it in 5-day increments, 5 nights. The other way I get respite is through Medicaid. And that is, I forget the number of hours, but I'll just say X number of hours per year. But that respite is where I have a home health aide that works Monday through Friday. I can get X number of additional hours, so that, like, I come back from a work trip, I was smoked, and the social worker's like, I can give you a Saturday and Sunday home health aide if you want. And so we did. And so here's the catch to respite. The first time I used it, I felt like I abandoned her. I felt like I dropped her off at the pound and abandoned her. The guilt that I felt leaving her there, the crying from before I even got out of the facility and into the car, I was already bawling. And she felt abandoned and scared and didn't like it. But I got to tell you, you have to take advantage of it if you've got it in your plan, because those breaks are must-haves. Those times that I use it. I posted a video a while back where I took a week off and went to a veterans type retreat here in Florida. And it was funny, the comments that I got in the videos after like day 3, I posted this video of me, and everybody's like, wow, you look so much better. And just
Sleep.
3 days. Yeah. So it still breaks my heart. It still scares her to be left, but she sees what it does for me when I come back. By the way, I posted a video of me picking her up after all of that. I miss her after a few days. I start to miss her. And so that, what's it? The distance makes the heart grow fonder kind of thing. So
absence makes the heart grow fonder.
There it is. What she said.
Another thing I just want to mention for those of you who are taking care of someone with dementia, there is a new program through Medicare called the GUIDE program that offers respite care for caregivers. Of course, there's a lot of rules attached to it. So go look it up. You can just Google GUIDE Medicare dementia and you'll see it. It's a brand new program. They're pushing it out, so it's going to show up. But that's been something that has already been proven to be very helpful to caregivers.
Is that a nationwide program or a Florida program?
No, I think it is nationwide. I will put that in the show notes. In addition to all this other stuff we've talked about, you've dropped so many resources. So as we wrap up today, though, I want to give you a chance. If you were sitting down with a brand new caregiver today, and let's say it's a brand new caregiver that's just like you, their spouse, they're a husband, or they're a wife, and their loved one has just been diagnosed with an early onset disease like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, what would you tell them?
I had that experience where I was the young guy new to this in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We went to a Parkinson's whatever thing, and I talked to this guy. I go, hey, what advice do you have? And he was pretty far down the road. You know what he told me? He said, run away. He's like, if you don't have kids, man, just he goes, I would never do that. He gave me that advice.
So not that.
Well, that's what I'm saying is so don't be that guy. Here's the reason why I bring this up is that was the first indication of just how hard this process is going to be. And I didn't think much of it. I thought he was a dirtbag for saying it, but here I am 20 years later, and I'm like, I understand why he felt that way. But my advice to anybody that would be just like me, and statistically speaking, it's not that many people. There's a little over 1 million people in the United States with Parkinson's. And I forget the numbers that have young onset Parkinson's, but it's not that many. And so if you truly love someone, you're going to stay dedicated to them. And my advice to them is do everything now. Do all the things that you always wanted to do together now, because as the disease progresses, you can't just I can't just get her in the car right now and take her to Publix to get a pub sub, right? Like that's an ordeal to do. And 5, 6, 7 years ago, I could just, hey, let's go to the beach for the weekend, or let's jump on a plane and fly up to New York City or something. Like there's a lot of things in the bucket list that you want to try to do now. And if you don't have the finances or the means or the modes to do those kinds of bucket list items, at least do things together now. Make memories now. Be there for your children. If you have children in the mix, they're feeling it too, and get involved. And then the last thing I'll say in my little ramble here is therapy early. Communicate as a family, your spouse and your kids. Communicate early, communicate often, and look into getting therapy as soon as possible to help you navigate this process. And I will say one last thing. You're going to be okay. Like if you're going to, it's not the end of the world, but you can make it worse than it needs to be. and it doesn't have to be that bad if you do all the things that we've kind of talked about here.
Yeah. Well, Brent, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. Where can people find Held Light, and how can they support the work you're doing? I'll, of course, put everything in the show notes, but let them know.
Yeah, so if you just Google search Held Light, HELDLIGHT, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and I have a Held Light podcast on Spotify as well. YouTube is where my podcast and shorts are. And as far as support, I'm not monetizing anything right now. I'm not selling anything right now. I'm making a little bit of money off of Facebook. Like so many views will give me a little bit of money here, but I don't know what this is yet. I have people that want to do and collaborate and do things, and I'm like, that feels like a sellout. I don't want to do that. I'm sharing a story. So,
but also for any of our friends that are listening to this, that are sharing their caregiver journey online, if you are selling lotions, knock yourselves out. We're excited. Do what you need to do to support you and your family. We no shade on if you're monetizing through that TikTok shop. We know, we get it, we understand. But find Brent at Held Light. You can just at Held Light anywhere, you're going to find him. And of course, you can check out the show notes to get all the links, books, resources, people he talked about. I'll even link the stuff about the guide program. Thank you so much, Brent.
Yeah, no problem.
If this conversation resonated with you, please share it with a caregiver in your life. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss an episode. You can find more resources at JeanetteYates.com and check out the show notes. Until next time, feel good, not guilty.